Welcome in, everybody. My name's Brady Michael, and today, April 27th, I will once again be hogging the mic, coming to you from a cloudy and dreary, it's back, Jonesboro, Arkansas. It's supposed to storm later, so I'm on the clock here, but it's officially NFL Draft Day, and I am fully prepared, as always, to take my place on the couch the next 2 evenings and pretty much all of Saturday until Mr. Irrelevant is called up. So call me crazy. That's just how much I love watching all of the college players we have come to know and adore move on up the ladder to the professionals. We'll get to that after the TwitterCon today. We have other pressing issues that have to be addressed first. So on the show today, I'll recap some of the Georgia series in Athens that I'm dreading, along with injury updates there. You have North Texas tight end and Conference USA all-conference player Var'Keyes Gums. He joined the squad right after his Arkansas visit this past week. A breakdown on him and how he might be able to contribute immediately. But he wasn't the only addition since the last episode. And as I stated, if the two in-state four-stars committed to the Hogs, I would delve into their play a little bit, and I will uphold my promise there and add in the other four-star commit from Friday. You have Alito's Jaden Allen, so we'll get to that later. Following those segments, it'll be a quick TwitterCon, and then we can get straight into the NFL draft talk and my mock draft that will be admired by almost nobody. So before I get too far, you can currently find Hawgin the Mic over on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. Go check out the YouTube channel, and those listening on Red Wolf Radio. This may be the last time you hear from me for a while, considering I'm not sure how the whole I'm on summer break and no longer will be doing this for a class thing will work. But all things considered, if you still tune in, I appreciate it. You can follow me personally on Instagram at Brady_Michael. Michael spelled M-I-C-H-A-E-L. Replace the I with a 1. And over on Twitter at BMichael with Michael the same way. Now, I have another lead story this week. And how uncharacteristic of me would it be to not take a look at the pot of chili that Coach Prime has spilled all over the Boulder, Colorado office floor. Very hot and spicy chili at that. So let's start there today. For those unfamiliar with this, because the offseason means zero football attention for you, allow me to elaborate. But first, I actually want to say, if you don't pay attention to football during the offseason, quote, then you automatically earn the side eye from me. Deion was at Jackson State the past 3 years, and after losing their last and only game that they lost in the 2022 season, the rumors of him leaving for Colorado turned out to be factual, and he wound up in Boulder. Now, he inherited a team that went 1-11 last season, and seeing the number of players transfer out alongside having a new head coach wasn't anything odd or in need of magnification. Coach Prime was still getting players in on visits and wound up with the number 1 transfer class before too long, and it still remains there as it stands with a total of 30 players transferring in as of today. You have Miles Slusher and Jordan Dominic, 2 former Razorbacks. They make up part of that 30. It was already beginning to tilt the seesaw a little bit before the spring game in terms of some stuff that was going down. But the Monday after the spring game is when the fun really started to get going, and they lost. Are y'all ready for this? 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers, 2 very solid ones. One of them was their leading receiver. 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs, all on scholarship. That's 17 scholarship players getting thrown out the window like cash by those California bank robbers back in whatever year that was, 2012, 2013? Anyway, you can't forget that the one not on scholarship also transferred out because there was 18 total. And that's just for one day. One of those wideouts, as I mentioned, was Montana Lamonius Craig. He had 3 catches for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns in the spring game, that I might add. And also Arkansas's offered him, by the way, but I don't think there'll be too much movement there. Then on Tuesday and Wednesday, there were 7 more that entered their name, which brought the total scholarship players leaving the program to 63. That's 63 out of their 83-man roster from last year. And here's a little reminder. The transfer portal closes its doors this Sunday on April 30th, so do the math real quick. You have 30 players in and just 20 players remain from the scholarship players from last year. Deion has 3 days to get this team from 50 players to at least 80, I would say, under that, or he's going to be throwing scholarships at players even less deserving than the ones that he's run off. It gets better. 2 of the transfers from Colorado went to ESPN and 1 went to Twitter to vocalize that they were not given access to their practice footage to market themselves in the portal. And just as of yesterday, players were finally granted access to their footage, but to the pre-spring practices of 2023. So no spring practice from this year or spring game film. I wonder how much of a gut punch that is for the player named Zachary Courtney, who was hurt all of last season and only had film from this offseason. That's not a good look. They also just played it off like they planned to allow access to the film all along, but it's starting to become increasingly obvious that Coach Prime may be a complete joke, and he's clearly self-centered. That's pretty obvious. Don't get me wrong. I think Deion is a fun and a great person and motivator, but his power that he's exerting as a football head coach at a Power 5 school already is making his ego look about as high as the elevation of Boulder, Colorado. Guess we'll see if he can pull off the miracle of filling out the roster in check the watch 3 days. Just keep tabs on that, but let's go ahead and get this out of the way. Leaving off last week's episode, Arkansas baseball was 30-7, and now they're sitting at 30 wins and 11 losses, and they're getting set to host the Aggies of Texas A&M. And some drama is unfolding in the form of injuries and pitching dropping off. It's going to be a battle for this last quarter of the season. So what exactly did happen at Georgia? And it started out on Thursday night with a 6-5 loss, thanks to a 5-run third inning by the Dogs. You had Hunter Holland start the game, and his up-and-down cycle, or really just failure on the road, it continued. There'll be the games where he looks like an All-American, or in this case, this past weekend, get raked. He went through 5 innings total, and that devastating third was included in there, and he finished off with a line of 7 hits, 6 runs, 5 walks, and just 2 strikeouts. The damage was done by the time that they put Dylan Carter in the game, as he only gave up 2 hits and 2 2/3 innings, which is an ideal performance, but the bats didn't do their due diligence for him. Despite owning more hits in the game than Georgia, there just wasn't enough firepower alongside leaving the bases juiced in the 8th inning. To cast my vote for Parker Rowland for starting catcher, I would like to point out that Hudson Polk struck out 3 times, one of which was in that bases-loaded 8th inning. Now, Parker Rowland has been banged up a little bit, which is why he didn't play, but I want him to start when he comes back, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit. Moving to Game 2, ended up being the most one-sided affair of the 3-game series. Went 7-3 in the favor of Georgia, of course. Will McIntyre, he got the start, and just like Hunter Holland, just can't seem to find that consistency, especially on the road. He ended up going 4 innings while giving up 6 hits, 6 runs, all of which were earned, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts. And as with Game 1, the damage was already done by the time the reliever came in. Cody Adcock was the guy that got called upon, and in 3 innings, he only gave up 4 hits and 1 run. The disappointing part of that game is that Charlie Condone, the superstar freshman, went 0-4 and had 3 strikeouts, but instead, their designated hitter pulled off a Wendy's 4-for-4 and was credited with 2 RBIs in the game. Offensively, it wasn't the prettiest of pictures, but Caleb Calley did have his 2nd consecutive 2-hit game. You also had Harold Call. He got the start at shortstop and was the only other player to record at least 2 hits. The bigger issue at the plate for the Hogs in Game 2 was that they failed to get the starting pitcher Charlie Goldstein out. He ended up going 6 innings and only gave up 3 hits, and that was one of my biggest keys for Arkansas's bats going into this series, is that they needed to force Georgia to go to the bullpen early, and that was proven once he was taken out by the 4 hits and 3 runs given up by the 2 relief pitchers to follow Goldstein in just 2 innings. Game 3 is one that makes my stomach churn, and looking at the final pitcher to pitch for the Hogs, my affinity for a certain player will continue to live on. It will not die. Going into the bottom of the 9th, Arkansas had a very nice cushion, an 8-4 lead, and it felt as if DVH could finally just throw a younger arm and roll out of Athens, avoiding the sweep. But, of course, it was nowhere near that simple. Why would it be? For once, the starting pitcher had a solid outing in the trip to Athens. As Hawgin Smith started, he pitched 5 innings and allowed just 3 hits and 2 earned runs while striking out a nice 8 batters. Yet Christian Fouch and come in. He was placed into cleanup duty in the 7th inning, and he handled business there and had no issue in the 8th. And then the 9th inning came around. He then walked the leadoff batter and then allowed back-to-back singles, loading the bases for none other than freshman Ben Bybee, who had no outs to deal with. And lo and behold, it took a whole 5 pitches for the comeback to take place for Georgia. You had, starting out, the big bat of Connor Tate, who I believe was second on the team in home runs. He pulled off a grand slam on Bybee's 4th pitch to him, which was a hanging fastball at 93 to tie the game. And then the next batter up was Parks Harbor, and the very first pitch, he went yard, and the game was over. It was also another hanging fastball just right down Main Street. And then it slammed the door in Arkansas's face. I can talk as much smack as I will allow myself on this pod, so allow me to dabble in that a little bit. I want to flex my freedom muscles for a second. Dave Van Horn wanted to save the arms of some of his pitchers for one inning to throw Bybee into a situation where the freshman was almost literally pissing down his leg. Now, he does have some junk that he can throw. I'm not going to argue his talent, but why put him in the situation? Throw your rebuttals. Go ahead, I'm ready. I know getting a young pitcher experience in situations like those are important. I understand that after a stellar and possibly career game against Tennessee just a weekend ago, that maybe he has some confidence, but holy crap, did that backfire. And it resulted in the first sweep against an SEC team since 2018. So let's go ahead and move down to the plate. It was frankly Caleb Cali, and the rest is meaningless. Cali had his best game as a Razorback, I believe, going 3 of 4 at the plate, racked up 5 RBIs. You had Hudson Polk, as he had a bounce-back game, and he picked up 2 RBIs in that performance. But let's go ahead and look at the injury situation. Players that were used in the Georgia series that were banged up. I want to start with Tavian Josenberger. He tweaked his ACL on Saturday, got taken out of the game, and he's already been said to be out for the Texas A&M series. So there goes one of your best bats and your leadoff man. You have Dylan Carter, after his Friday performance, had some soreness, but he's supposedly good to go for the bullpen. Come this weekend, I wish we would have had him for Game 3. They probably could have, but again, I'll move on from that. Peyton Stovall, he missed the Missouri State game, but all signs point to no issues there. It was just for rest. Wouldn't have made a difference probably. Anyway, Dave Van Horn has made it official that Brady Tigert will be a participant this weekend, so there's some happy news there. And likely a starter for the first time in his career so that they can manage his workload, his number of pitches. Jared Wagner is still out and expected to be until hopefully the South Carolina series. We'll need him badly for that one, but could wind up healing up, and they have him wait until the last series at Vandy. It's clear that Arkansas will be battling some lineup switching over every weekend going forward, but getting Brady back is a massive step, especially with an inconsistent few starts from our main pitchers. So with that positive news coming, let's go ahead and keep the positive news rolling. You have Arkansas landing the North Texas transfer tight end Varkey's Gums. We'll start there. The 13th transfer and most recent transfer addition for Arkansas comes in the form of the 6'3", 235-pound tight end from North Texas. He earned first-team All-CUSA last season as a redshirt freshman, and he is a massive loss for the Mean Green, as they've already lost another solid tight end that Arkansas was also pursuing, Jake Roberts, and I believe he's since gone to Baylor in that first cycle of the portal. During last season, Gums put up a North Texas career record for tight end receptions with 34, receiving yards 458, and he tied the tight end touchdown reception record with 6 of them. Gabe Brooks over on 247 Sports is a recruiting analyst that breaks down a handful of Arkansas's commits, primarily from the Texas area. And he's also a huge North Texas fan as a North Texas alum. And he went over there to the Arkansas page to shed light on gums. And it goes perfectly in line with what I've seen on tape. So I hope Gabe doesn't mind me more or less taking some of his points on gums. His measurables as a, quote, smaller tight end doesn't damage his ability to take the ball away from a defender in jump ball situations. He's just a big-time athlete with above-average strength, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, and not his so-so frame. That wasn't the majority of his catches, however, as he's a primarily catch-and-run tight end, and he'll get going like a boulder downhill. He understands angles, and he can make a linebacker or a safety look silly and make him under-pursue with his straight-line speed that he has. With Pittman, what Pittman has really been harping on about with tight ends this spring is how well they can block. Right now, we just have Nathan Bax as the primary tight end blocker, leaving the field to be primary pass catchers as they continue to develop as willing blockers. That's been the case for Luke Haas directly from Coach Pitt. And the thing about Gums, including his athleticism, is that at North Texas, he was used all over the place in blocking schemes, mainly as an H-back / fullback role, but he can certainly be an inline blocker off each side of the tackles. And like his speed, the strength of his punch on blocks can be surprising to some linebackers or defensive ends. And an interesting point that Gabe Brooks made about his 247 Sports rating out of high school was that a big boost came in his rating from his shot put numbers because they lacked the official measurables on height and weight for him. So as it seems, there is a strong correlation between big-time shot put numbers and inline tight ends and linebackers that reflect explosion and likely a higher draft chance. I learned something by going through that. What we do know is that his multifaceted play as a tight end will have him find the field quickly. You still have Shamar Easter to come in very soon. You combine him with Tyrus Washington and Luke Haas, and that's 4 average at worst receiving tight ends. So you best believe that they'll be getting the football. It also begs the question that many had about Haas coming out of high school is that will he get some time to split out at wide receiver more often with this addition? I kind of hope that answer is a resounding yes. And so I'll leave it at that. I'll quickly recap the great day for Razorback football that was last Friday, as it started with the surprise of the 3 with Aledo cornerback Jay Nallen. He's a composite 4-star rated the number 30 cornerback in the nation for the 2024 class. The only thing likely hurting his ranking a touch is his measurables, as he sits at 5'10 and just 155 pounds. Expect that to change. He has offers from the likes of Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, and USC. Texas is also on that list and was actually where he originally committed. And then I believe he decommitted back in March and didn't take him long to flip the idea of becoming a Razorback. He's a solid track athlete and was actually a part of the varsity squad there at Aledo as a freshman, and he started some games and helped them to win a state title in 2020. That's just another 4-star likely to receive a rating boost, and that's another pickup for Coach Woodson as he continues to work and really rake in some talent. Now, Collins and Crutchfield were together whenever Charleston Collins' commitment ceremony occurred, so we knew something was brewing there before anything even went down. And besides the guy from On 3 that ruined Collins' choice by speaking it before he even unveiled his T-shirt, that was a massive disaster. But it didn't seem like he was too upset about it. It began with Collins and his mom making that known. Then Crutchfield just kind of all of a sudden had an Arkansas shirt on himself, and he had posted his commitment video on social media. And as mentioned last week, go ahead and break down both players a little bit. Charleston Collins is a composite 4-star, and he's rated as the number 26 defensive lineman. And 247 Sports boosts that rating as they themselves have him as a top 180 player and the number 22 defensive lineman in the country. He did play mostly inside on the defensive line, but did play some stand-up edge for Little Rock Mills, And last year he pulled off 124 tackles and 12 sacks. He also had 5 fumble recoveries, but just 1 forced fumble for his junior year. He also played a little bit on offense at tight end for the Comets, and that's where you can get a peek at his athleticism a little bit more, because Collins, he can really turn upfield and go. He's got some nice speed for a man his size. He's a pure force of nature that he does need to get himself a little bit more seasoning, get some technique under wraps, but he'll be a problem for SEC teams likely the moment that he steps on campus. You need to hold out hope that he can be an early enrollee next year. Crutchfield has a slightly different path out of Pine Bluff as he kind of blipped onto the radar after his junior year, and then momentum took over. At 6'2", and he's creeping up on 180 pounds. He's one of those big stride wideouts that will catch you sleeping if you think he's slow. Watching his film, he's also just disrespected any press coverage by using his big strides to just bounce outside of the defensive back. That's allowed him to be a deep threat for the Zebras down there, as he ended up catching just 17 passes but racked up 517 yards and 9 touchdowns. That's over 30 yards a catch. That's a video game number. Many consider him to be an athlete instead of a pure wide receiver, and it's a fair assessment, as Crutchfield also played some safety, and he has a knack for finding the football and getting downhill. And I don't remember if I mentioned his offers last time, so I'll go ahead and do that. He's got plenty of SEC flavor. He's got Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M, South Carolina's in there. You also have Oklahoma in there and plenty more Power 5 schools. Crutchfield is just inside 4-star status over on 247 Sports Composite, which is stellar for just one breakout season. His multi-sport background certainly is paying dividends there, and you can see the potential is all there. I just need to see if he can expand his horizons beyond being a primary deep threat, expand his route tree, prove that he can have some really nasty footwork, and then we might be talking about something pretty special. Let's go ahead and shift over to the TwitterCon. For those that are new or those that have forgotten what the TwitterCon is about, let me break it down for you. The TwitterCon, like the TourCon that the National Weather Service has, is a rating on how dangerous, scary, angry that Arkansas Twitter is, either a couple days ago, in the present, or encompassing future events. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10, and that's pretty much it. We went from true peace last week to inner despair in just 7 days. As of today, Darian Ford announced that he's out the door, and that's also reflecting the fact that Muss is processing these players under our nose and going for the best roster possible, and I can't say that it was really a surprise, even though he announced his return about 3 weeks ago, ETA. That's created a pretty big rift today. You also have to shift away from sports news for a second. You have Jerry Springer. He passed away this morning, and so that got some emotions flowing for some. Baseball is quite possibly an afterthought, as most of Arkansas fans have come to terms with the injuries being a problem, as discussed earlier. And that's also because it's draft day, of course, so why dwell on that when you can be happy for the next 3 days? The biggest thing that I caught sifting through Twitter was about C.J. Stroud's S2 decision-making test. I forget the actual name of it, so good on me for that, I guess. He finished with an 18%, which was 10% worse than the second lowest among the quarterbacks that took the test. And that now has a ton of scouts looking away from Stroud as a sure top 5 pick, and even falling out of the top 10 entirely. That's not going to happen. I'll break that down later, but turn on the tape, and it's clear that Stroud is a gamer, so there's just no telling. I'd love to see the stats pairing those test results with NFL success. So we'll see what I do with Stroud here in a few. I don't think Arkansas Twitter is all that dangerous today. Just a bit of sorrow and confusion, mostly sorrow. So I'll stick the rating at a 3 out of 10 and be ready for it to rise when someone's NFL team drafts Will Levis. You'll get to see who I think that is, because that alone could jump that rating up, especially if the Cowboys pick someone they dislike, because there's a lot of Arkansas fans that are also Dallas Cowboys fans. Speaking of the draft, I'm not going to hold out too much longer. let's go ahead and shift down to my mock draft. I want to say straight up that I have never done a mock draft before. So now that's out of the way. I was trying to decide on whether or not I would allow trades to be placed in this draft, and I decided to put a cap at 4 trades and do no more than that as I went down and decipher some articles on potential trades, rumors, and just kind of go from there. Now, the Miami Dolphins had to forfeit their pick, and this is something that I've known but just completely forgot about because of their ongoing investigation with their head coach, I think, that feels like old news to this point. So this year, there are only 31 first-round picks. So tough luck to the player picked first on day 2 for missing out on some potential money there. I believe the Steelers get that 32nd pick. But here's the thing. I don't know if they'll be picking tonight, on Thursday, opening day of the draft, or if they'll be the first pick on day 2. Anywho, I'll give a little depth to my decision-making for some of these, most of these actually, because I would guess a lot will need my shameless explanations. This might as well be a repeat of the March Madness episode where I act like I know everything, have the stats in front of me, and have everything fail me. It's the cycle of loving sports. So the first overall pick, traded from Chicago down to Carolina. It's clear that they want a quarterback, and I don't think there's any more of an obvious pick than Bryce Young. It seems like it's a done deal to this point, and maybe the only stamped and sealed official pick as it stands. We know that they traded up to get a quarterback, and many thought it would be Stroud at first, but that has since dropped. Will Levis as a possibility. I would hope for the health of Panthers fans that they don't make that mistake. And that first overall pick bet for Anthony Richardson from Florida, that's not going to come true. I believe it's pretty chalk there. Then you move down to the Texans, and they were thinking about quarterback, and now it's kind of shifted to no one on this earth knows what the Texans are going to do, and I don't even think they know what they're going to do. But I have them going with Will Anderson, Alabama defensive end. Do the Texans need a quarterback? Absolutely they do. But with the Stroud stories and the Tennessee talks involved with Stroud, I think that they go with a safe pick and go for QB at either number 12 or in day 2 if a quality one sticks around. If they go Levis, which with how dumb the organization has been in recent memory, I was trying to think of how to word that, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I do think they just go best available, and that's Will Anderson, which likely fuels the Titans' rumors of trading up to number 3 be a reality. I could also see them staying in state and go with Tyree Wilson, the big defensive end from Texas Tech, but it does feel a little off. But so does going back-to-back Alabama players to start a draft, because first off, they've never had a first-round quarterback or a first overall quarterback. So I'll go Will Anderson there. Number 3, it's a trade that a lot of people have pretty much stamped out of all of them, and that's the Arizona Cardinals going to trade down in the draft to the Tennessee Titans. And I'm going to get a little bit risky with this one. C.J. Stroud has been in talks with Tennessee, and I believe that he'll end up in Tennessee, especially if he falls, and all of those rumors about him losing stock because of that test become reality. What happens if the Titans just go Anthony Richardson instead, the quarterback out of Florida? Hear me out. He's what they wanted their quarterback draftee from last season to be. Malik Willis is the man I'm speaking of. He looked like a near disaster the majority of last season, and doesn't exactly make me happy because he had to throw to Treylon Burks, and Treylon Burks was not getting targeted as much as he should have. And with all the talk of Stroud, once again, I lean toward them going with the freakiest athlete at the position since Lamar Jackson. If they really want to trade up, I believe that the Cardinals will let them. I don't think there's any doubt there. They still do have Ryan Tannehill, so there's no immediate pressure if it were to be Richardson, but I would imagine that their pick will be expected to start at least by midseason. If they trade up, we know that it will be a quarterback. It's just a matter of whom. And then if C.J. Stroud survives the number 3 pick, I have him going to the Indianapolis Colts at number 4. And there you have it. It's the match that everyone has had in mind for months now. Stroud staying close to home and going to play for Indianapolis. I, for one, believe that this happens with or without a trade happening at number 3. And if Stroud does go earlier, expect Will Levis to be a copycat of Carson Wentz in every disastrous way you can think of and insert him at this number 4 spot. But everything just feels right for C.J. Stroud to fall into place here in Indianapolis. So that's a gut call, and so I think he ends up being a Colt. And then number 5, you have the Seattle Seahawks via Denver. And it seems like Jalen Carter's been the automatic selection for this up until today. I've seen a lot of talk about now it's just not a certain thing, but I'm not changing my mind on it. I still think they go Jalen Carter. It's been mocked by nearly everyone on God's green earth to this point, and it just makes too much sense. Now that his name is finally cleared from all of the drama that happened months back, the show is back on, and he has every right to remain a top 5 selection with his talent. Seattle's been in contact with Carter the most out of any prospect, it seems. Now, Tyree Wilson could be another sleeper here, but I think Pete Carroll follows through on the noise that's been surrounding Carter there. And then I've already mentioned Tyree Wilson twice and not given him to a team. And so I have him going number 6 to the Detroit Lions as they hold the Rams pick. I believe he's 6'6", 275, somewhere in that range out of Texas Tech. You can throw him anywhere, but the guy had to go eventually, and the Lions apparently think really highly of the former Red Raider. So I have zero doubts that they lean on defense with this pick. And assuming that Wilson drops to them, I think it becomes another best player available situation. And also paints a super fun picture to have Aiden Hutchinson, their first-round pick last year, lined up opposite of Wilson on the edge. They could certainly go the cornerback route with Witherspoon or Gonzalez, and that would come as no shock to me or anyone, but I'll lock in Tyree Wilson here. Number 7, you have the Las Vegas Raiders, and I believe the first cornerback comes off the board here. I have Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. He's my favorite cornerback prospect in the draft, and it's about time that the Raiders make a good first-round selection after stinking up the draft year after year after year after year. And I want to shout out my friend Colton Edwards. He's a big-time Raiders fan, and he deserves some happiness in his life and from the draft for once, and so I got you. So, a big-time corner is Christian Gonzalez. He's 6'1", nearly 200 pounds, and he's elite in so many aspects of the game. And if you go back and listen to the NFL Combine episode, I have a lot to say about him. I think he'll be an immediate starter on any team that drafts him. He'd get the blender if he lands in Vegas of facing Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert 2 times in a year. But Vegas really needs some help in the secondary, and so I think that's where they go. Number 8, you have the Atlanta Falcons. I think the other corner comes off the board. Devon Witherspoon by way of Illinois. Now, there's been a ton of Bijan Robinson speak going around, but that's mostly from mock drafts having the 2 best corners off the board by this point. And with Witherspoon sticking around, I think that the Falcons go with a running back in the later rounds and that they rock out with Tyler Algier, who had a solid rookie season last year out of BYU. You also have the Witherspoon versus Gonzalez conversation on who's better, but I think it's a meaningless argument. Both will be great. I think they'll have long careers in the NFL, and having a 1-2 punch, looking at the Falcons situation if they were to draft them, they'd have a 1-2 punch of A.J. Terrell and Devon Witherspoon on the other side, and that would be a luxury for the Falcons because they have no one else behind A.J., so they need some help there. Number 9, the Chicago Bears via the Carolina pick. If the Bears don't trade down, which there's a lot of rumors about that, they need an offensive lineman, and I think that they stick with Paris Johnson as the first lineman off the board from Ohio State. They need help anywhere in reality, but their offensive line is just awful and old. Actually, their entire roster is old, and their offensive line's also really injury-prone. They've been linked to Johnson to this point, and I think he's the safest bet as the first lineman off the board at this position, with Peter Skoronski's stock slipping a little bit. Looking at their roster, I think you can throw Tevin Jenkins, their left tackle, over to the right tackle spot and put Paris at left. Or maybe you keep Tevin at left and allow Paris to develop at right and then flip him and then just go to work. What do I know, right? All right, number 10, I have another trade going on here. The original pick belonged to the Philadelphia Eagles. There's been a lot of talk about them wanting to trade out of this spot. And I think that the Vikings move up to number 10 because they want a quarterback. Want to move on from Cousins? Well, I'm sorry to announce that I think Will Levis is going to be your replacement out of Kentucky. And so my award for biggest flub of the draft goes to Minnesota by my own doing. Now, I do think Will Levis has the tools to succeed, but he's just not hitting the right buttons for me. He had the 9th best QBR in the SEC. He threw double-digit picks. The Vikings have also been linked to Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, but I think that Levis likely staying on the board to this point, that they finally take a chance to trade up with a team in Philly who's looking to trade down, especially to save some money that they just threw at Jalen Hurts for the biggest quarterback contract in the league now. Sorry to Minnesota fans, but this is your destiny now. I think Will Levis will be a guy that teams will have to trade up for. Been a lot of talk about the Buccaneers doing it, which also could be a position or an opportunity here. But I think the Vikings make that move. And now you have who would be sitting at 11 would have been the Tennessee Titans. But with that trade up to number 3, this one now belongs to the Cardinals. And I think they go with Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle from Georgia. Now, if the Cardinals decide to keep this pick and not trade down even further in the draft, I think they go offensive line. It's one of their weakest points on the team. You have Kyler Murray. He's still down with his ACL, but he's obviously still going to be their franchise quarterback. It's clear that they need more protection. And while I think Peter Skoronski would also be a viable option here, I think that the weight of Georgia's name being plastered all over Broderick, having many successful linemen in the league, one that Pittman recruited, I believe, his last year at Georgia. I could be mistaken there. He was definitely a part of his recruitment. But I think that Georgia tag just takes over, and that's where they go. Number 12, this is more of a pipe dream from a partial Houston Texans fan. They have this pick from Cleveland in the Deshaun Watson trade. I have Nolan Smith, the outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever you want to call him, from Georgia going here. And now, assuming that this freak athlete sticks around this long, the Texans better not miss this opportunity. There's a lot of backing that the Eagles might pick him at number 10, but with them moving down in this mock draft, the Cardinals not needing a linebacker as much as linemen at pick 11, the Texans need just about anything they can get. And now possessing two of the best athletes in the draft on that side of the ball would be an A-plus first round by anybody. Number 13, now this is where the most recent trade going on. The Green Bay Packers have swapped with the Jets with the Aaron Rodgers trade. And so who do I have going to the Packers now? I have the first tight end off the board, and that's Dalton Kincaid from Utah. And this is one of those picks thus far that is really just kind of up in the air. As I said, Aaron Rodgers, he's headed to the Jets. It's still fresh and shocking news to a lot of people. I don't even think it's set in with me. I mean, he's going to be going from a green team to a green team, so it's not going to hit as hard as it would going from, like, the Packers to the Chiefs. Color difference is a big thing for me, I guess. But it's the Jordan Love show now in Green Bay, and so that eliminates the first-round quarterback possibility, although I think that they should do it. I'm not a Jordan Love fan. But going defense would also be on brand for the Packers. You have Rashawn Gary still dealing with injuries. They're getting pretty old there on defense. But I think that they finally take on the option of getting their quarterback some help offensively, which, funnily enough, would happen right after they get rid of Rodgers, who was wanting that simple demand before he left. So Dalton Kincaid to Green Bay as the first tight end off the board. Number 14 belongs to the New England Patriots. I have Peter Skoronski, the offensive lineman out of Northwestern, finally going. And after sliding a little bit more than thought before the NFL Combine, the only reason he is sliding down most drafts is because he has short arms. It's not a talent issue, but Skoronski will still be a great pickup, even if he's picked in the top 10. I don't think many would argue it. Now, at Northwestern, he was a tackle, and he projects to be an offensive guard, and that would be a welcome addition to help protect Mac Jones and plug a hole that they have at guard, and he'd probably be a day one starter, if not midway through the season. Now, number 15, the pick that belongs to the New York Jets. I believe the first wide receiver finally comes off the board, and that's Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. With Rodgers in a new location, it's going to warrant a new weapon. They're going to have to show him that they really love him, and it's also at a position of need for the Jets, that being a slot receiver. So in a well-balanced, I'm not going to say bad wideout class, but a well-balanced receiver class, there isn't a ton of over risk in taking the mysterious player that is Smith-Njigba. Now they have Braxton Berrios and Randall Cobb at the slot as it stands, and if you cringed when I said that, that's why I think they go with Smith-Njigba here. So why not bring in another Ohio State wideout to play alongside Garrett Wilson? That one worked out pretty well. Number 16, you have the Washington Commanders, and I think they go offensive line. Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. So Washington is another one of those teams that needs a lot of help anywhere. Sam Howell is a serviceable quarterback, and considering the only first-round quality quarterback left on the board to this point is Hendon Hooker, which would feel like a reach at this spot if they tried to do it. If they do trade down from this spot, that could be a move to watch. But offensive line has been noted as a must. They lost Brandon Sheriff, the Sheriff. He's gone. And obviously, Rivera wants to run Antonio Gibson into the ground, so why not go ahead and get a road grader that is Darnell Wright? Number 17 belongs to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers are another one of those teams that a lot of people think might cause some chaos tonight. But I think that they stay put, and I think that they rock out with Emmanuel Forbes, the defensive back from Mississippi State. So the positions of need for Pittsburgh have been tabbed as offensive line and corner. And with two of the top corners and linemen going early, they'll either have to trade up to go tag one of those guys, or in my scenario, they'll be forced to settle with Forbes. And I wouldn't even consider it settling. He's clearly the number 3 corner, just outside that S-tier list that is Gonzalez and Witherspoon. I could also see the Commanders going with Forbes. They don't have a lot of cornerbacks either. And if that picks up steam, I would really expect the Steelers to trade up just so they don't lose out on all of their targets. Number 18 belongs to the Detroit Lions, but this is another one of those picks that's been talked about being just dropped out of the first round with some team, or where Detroit moves back into the late first round. And in this case, I have them trading it to the Raiders to get out of the first round. And so now we have the Las Vegas Raiders at this spot, and I think that they go Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. This is maybe my biggest what-if scenario here. The Raiders are in the quarterback game in this draft. That's a fact. There's been a lot of people stating that. But does Hooker have enough of a pull to have him trade into the first round, and mainly this early? I think that it's certainly a possibility, and with a team like Detroit who's looking to move down, according to a ton of people, it could be their best option to do so outside of Dallas at 26, who we all know Jerry Jones likes to move down in the draft. So, number 19 belongs to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It'll be the first year without Tom Brady. That said, I think they go defense. Lucas Van Ness, the defensive tackle from Iowa, he's been sitting around too long. I think that's who he goes to. Now, if Will Levis lasts this far, and it's not a case where they trade up to get him, which in my ideal world, Will Levis should still be on the board to this point, then the Buccaneers would absolutely move on him if they don't have to trade up. They like Levis quite a bit, as it seems. So that's why I think going with Van Ness here hurts a little bit. But they also need help on both sides of the offense. They need help on the offensive line and the defensive line. And having Van Ness from Iowa fall this far, which was also really hard to consider, he'd be a nice inside-outside guy to go in and plug in with Vita Vea and a really solid defense. Number 20 belongs to the Seattle Seahawks. I think they continue to go defensive line, and they go with defensive end Myles Murphy out of Clemson. Now, Anthony Richardson's hype, entered by yours truly, could end up being worthless, and a lot of people have him falling to number 20 and going to Seattle here and learning behind Geno Smith. But in the case that he doesn't, Seattle could really fill out their defensive line and go with a quarterback in day 2. They need an edge player and a wide receiver. So I think that Murphy would be a really solid pickup and not too much of a reach at this point. I think late first makes a lot more sense, but he's likely the best edge rusher on the board at this point. Number 21 belongs to the LA Chargers, and I have him going with Zay Flowers, the wide receiver from Boston College. Now, there's been some late rumors that have tied Flowers to LA, and there are great odds that he'll be available at this spot. And I think he's expected to be picked up between about here and the end of the first round. If he falls out of the first round, that'd be a major shock to me and a lot of other people. Looking at the roster for the Chargers, Keenan Allen's still there. Mike Williams is still there. But they can only play for so much longer. It feels like they've been there for a generation. So I think going with an immediate contributor and possibly a guy that can play in the slot some and inevitably replace one of the two guys, it makes a ton of sense. And so does the next pick, number 22, the Baltimore Ravens. I think they go Joey Porter Jr., the corner out of Penn State. The Ravens' most notable position in need is corner, and to get a player to go alongside Marlon Humphrey, Joey Porter will likely be there for them to this point. And to pick him up, and that'll fall in line with many other draft boards. Like I said, it makes a ton of sense to this point, so I'll just go ahead and rock with it. Now, 23 originally belonged to the Minnesota Vikings, but I have that pick being traded. And so now the Eagles reside in this spot. And I have Kalijah Kancey, the freaky Pittsburgh defensive tackle, going in this spot. If he falls this far, I don't think that he will, but if he does, the Eagles are a team that need a defensive tackle more than anything. And if he's at this spot and they happen to be there, he's the selection 10 times out of 10. The Eagles lost Javon Hargrave. He's gone. Fletcher Cox is bound to retire before too long. He's like 80 years old. So in the case you wanted evidence for that pick, there you have it. That didn't take too much. Number 24 belongs to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they've been leaning corner or offensive line. And there's a pretty good corner that'll still be on the board at this point. And that's Deonte Banks out of Maryland. He's another one of those corners that stands just outside that S-tier list of Witherspoon and Gonzalez. And Banks is one of those who ran a 4.3 40 at the Combine, and he'd fill a position of need for Jacksonville. There's been a lot of talk about Lucas Van Ness from Iowa falling to this spot if he lasts that long. But Banks would be a quality pickup here, and not too many would complain about it. 25 belongs to the New York Giants. It's weird seeing them this far down the board. But I have him going with the second receiver off the board, and that's Jordan Addison out of Southern Cal. I personally am not a huge fan of Addison despite his Biletnikoff season that he had at Pittsburgh. But with the Giants' hope for a top corner to this point gone, and assuming that they don't trade up to try and make that happen, taking another first-round wideout seems like a reality that they could make. They lost Kadarius Toney. I say lost, they released him. And he's now in Kansas City, helped them to the Super Bowl. And lots of issues are surrounding their wide receiver room as it stands. So Addison would be some duct tape to put on their leaking ship. That is their wide receiver room. Now, I have the Dallas Cowboys staying at number 26, even though they will likely trade out. But Will McDonald IV, the edge rusher out of Iowa State, is who I have here. Dallas not trading back is a risk that I'm willing to take with some of the noise that they have surrounding the love that is for McDonald and Dallas. You'd also be getting Parsons, a running mate, and that'd be a fun storyline to think about. You could also see Michael Mayer from Notre Dame here, but my gut tells me that his stock's dropped enough to see Dallas settle for a tight end in the later rounds. Number 27. Buffalo Bills, and it's about time. Bijan Robinson from Texas goes here. But here's the thing. I know for a fact that Robinson will not last this long in the draft. There's no way. But he has to go to somebody. And the Bills have been actually linked to Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs. But it would be a bonehead move not to take Bijan above him and go ahead and get a franchise running back to plug next to Josh Allen. You need to talk about a loaded backfield. And then you have Stephon Diggs outside. That's just ridiculous. And then just adding to that powerful offense they already run. Number 28 belongs to the Cincinnati Bengals. back-to-back running backs here. I think Jahmyr Gibbs goes. It all feels as if this one is now set in stone all of a sudden, especially if the Bills do pass on Gibbs. I saw Mel Kiper's final mock draft released earlier today, and he had the Bengals getting Gibbs at this exact spot. Now, the running backs could certainly go earlier. I'll state that again. But it always seems like some of the top running backs fall on draft day, one way or another. But both do deserve a first-round selection, so this is where I'll have them rest. Number 29 belongs to the New Orleans Saints by way of San Francisco through Miami and Denver. That's a really weird situation. I don't know how that happened. I didn't do any research on that. But this one is going to be a little bit of a reach. I have Jalen Hyatt, the Tennessee wide receiver, going number 29 here. The Saints are really in a search for a quality defensive end over any other position. But looking at who would be best available at this spot, it doesn't feel like the best move for New Orleans. Kansas State's Anadike Uzoma, he's there. Drew Sanders as an edge, he's there. Keon White from Georgia Tech is there. Ollie Gay from LSU. But it all feels like a little bit more of a reach. That said, I give you a reach. But you want to pair him up with Chris Olave? That would be a huge problem for defenses. And Hyatt just feels like a New Orleans-style pick. And that one's just another big-time guess out of me. Number 30 belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I have Brian Branch, the Alabama safety, going here. And guess what? Another Alabama player. But Branch would end up being a steal if he lasts to day 2 of the draft. And you have Philadelphia losing C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He signed with Detroit in free agency. So why not go ahead and go after the number 1 ranked safety in the draft? It fits. Philly could certainly train down from that spot. And there's talk about them doing so to go ahead and use a early second-round pick to go for a safety. But my gut tells me that this is what they'll end up doing. Number 31 belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champs. I have Quentin Johnston, the big TCU wide receiver, going here. The Chiefs could end up being one of those draft record teams come a few hours from now. There really is no direct answer to what they'll do. They have interest in Zay Flowers and one of the top 2 running backs. I believe it's Gibbs that they have interest in. But one player that has ties to Kansas City in the draft process so far is Johnston. He worked out with Patrick Mahomes, and with a likely shot of some of these wideouts falling down the board, it would be worthwhile to go ahead and pair him up with Hopkins on the outside and let them get the hype to go back to a Super Bowl next season. And then since there is no 32nd pick or last first-round pick, I don't really know how to word it. The 32nd pick does belong to Pittsburgh via God knows how. And if they do end up picking tonight, I'll go ahead and say who I think might be a good fit there, and it's Brian Brzee, the defensive tackle from Clemson. I don't want to elaborate a ton on Brzee. There's not a lot there. We know that he's a freak, but he's had injury issues, hurt his stock over the few years that he was at Clemson. And Pittsburgh needs an interior defensive lineman. So why not go ahead and take the player that's proven he has the talent to play early on? He was one of the top recruits in his class coming out of high school. And then plug him in there with Cameron Hayward, learn from him, and go ahead and call it a day. And so that is the Brady mock draft. And if it's 10% correct, I'll take all the credit. And there's only a couple more things I want to touch on here. I want to look at maybe the best fits for some of the Arkansas draft-eligible players, or ones that I think might get drafted. Starting with Drew Sanders, you didn't hear his name mentioned in my mock draft in the first round. That was a painful one to leave out, but it just seems like he's a second-round guy. Here we are, just a few hours away from the draft. I believe that the only way he slips into round 1 would be if the Bills lose all of their prospects listed above Sanders on their big board. He's been linked the most to Buffalo, and certainly could happen straight up. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. But he would fill a role for them at linebacker and bring versatility that position hasn't brought them all that much. The other team to watch would be the Raiders early in round 2, as they also have a lot of interest in Sanders and an edge/linebacker. So watch that number 38 pick in the second round as well. Ricky Stromberg, apparently the Rams have interest, and as a team that leans heavy on the run, why not go ahead and get a developmental offensive lineman that loves to run dudes over late on either day 2 or early on day 3? Speaking of those picks, the Rams have 2 third-round picks early, so if the Rams are indeed the team to move on a player that they believe is a hidden gem, then look towards picks 69 or 77 for the Rams. Move down to Matt Landers as maybe the last Arkansas player to get his name called. I think immediately about a team that has a quarterback with a cannon of an arm. And so who's the first teams to pop into your head? Probably the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Chargers. It's gone Justin Herbert. The Jets now with Aaron Rodgers. I said it was something that hasn't set in yet, but saying that, it's set in a little bit. And possibly New England, which if Belichick is going to end up with another Arkansas Razorback in a Patriots uniform, then out of all of them, I think Landers holds the highest odds as a late 5th or 6th round pickup. My apologies to Jaden Hazelwood and Dalton Wagner, but it feels meaningless to try and get too deep into the 7th round discussion. It'd be the equivalent of me going out to wash my car while it's raining outside here. It wouldn't be worth my time. But speaking of time, that's all the time I have. So we got to another end. It is currently 4:46, and I have about 2 hours to go ahead and prepare for the draft tonight. I hope all of you are doing the same. I'm going to try and get this episode up as quickly as I can. But I want to thank you all for listening. Let me go ahead and give a little housekeeping as I normally do. Hawgin the Mic is available again on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. Go sub to the YouTube channel. That would be greatly appreciated. And to those that listened on Red Wolf Radio to this episode and throughout this entire semester, like I said, this could be the last time that you get to hear my voice for a while. I know the tears are coming down, but I want to thank you guys for listening too. In terms of social media, you can find me on Instagram at Brady_Michael. Michael spelled Michael, replace the I with a 1. And over on Twitter at BMichael with Michael the exact same way. And if you want to read my content over on Fifth Quarter, just go up there into that URL and type in fifthquarter.net/author/I'm_Just_Brady. And there you can look at my articles that I pump out, hopefully getting back into the cycle of once per week. Now that college is wrapping up, finals week is here and will be next week as well. But I'm going to go ahead and stop rambling. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. And this is the final episode for my official semester class with the audio production course that I'm doing this for originally. But I'll say this now, I will continue this over the summer, so not all is lost. Thank you guys. I'm Brady Michael, and I'm no longer hogging the mic. I will catch you guys next time.